BBC Television is a service of the British Broadcasting Corporation. The corporation, which has operated in the United Kingdom under the terms of a royal charter since 1927, has produced television programmes from its own studios since 1932, although the start of its regular service of television broadcasts is dated to November 2, 1936. The domestic TV BBC television channels are broadcast without any commercial advertising, and collectively they account for more than 30% of all UK viewing. The services are funded by a television licence. History of BBC Television. The BBC operates several television networks, television stations, and related programming services in the United Kingdom. As well as being a broadcaster, the corporation also produces a large number of its own programmes in-house, thereby ranking as one of the world's largest television production companies. Early years. Baird Television Limited made Britain's first television broadcast, on September 30, 1929 from its studio in Long Acre, London, via the BBC's London transmitter, using the electromechanical system pioneered by John Logie Baird. This system used a vertically scanned image of 30 lines just enough resolution for a close-up of one person, and with a bandwidth low enough to use existing radio transmitters. Simultaneous transmission of sound and picture was achieved on March 30, 1930, by using the BBC's new twin transmitter at Brookmans Park. By late 1930, 30 minutes of morning programmes were broadcast Monday to Friday, and 30 minutes at midnight on Tuesdays and Fridays, after BBC Radio went off the air. Baird broadcasts via the BBC continued until June 1932. The BBC began its own regular television programming from the basement of Broadcasting House, London, on August 22, 1932. The studio moved to larger quarters in 16 Portland Place, London, in February 1934, and continued broadcasting the 30-line images, carried by telephone line to the medium-wave transmitter at Brookmans Park, until September 11, 1935, by which time advances in all electronic television systems made the electromechanical broadcasts obsolete. After a series of test transmissions and special broadcasts that began in August, regular BBC television broadcasts officially resumed on October 1, 1936, from a converted wing of Alexandra Palace in London, which housed two studios, various scenery stores, makeup areas, dressing rooms, offices, and the transmitter itself, now broadcasting on the VHF band. BBC Television initially used two systems, on alternate weeks, the 240-line Baird Intermediate Film System and the 405-line Marconi EMI system, each making the BBC the world's first regular high-definition television service, broadcasting Monday to Saturday from 15:00 to 16:00 and 21:00 to 22:00. The two systems were to run on a trial basis for 6 months. Early television sets supported both resolutions. However, the Baird system, which used a mechanical camera for filmed programming and Farnsworth image dissector cameras for live programming, proved too cumbersome and visually inferior, and was dropped in February 1937. Initially, the station's range was officially a 40 km radius of the Alexandra Palace transmitter. In practice, however, transmissions could be picked up a good deal further away, and on one occasion in 1938 were picked up by engineers at RCA in New York, who were experimenting with a British television set. Mechanically scanned, 30-line television broadcasts by John Logie Baird began in 1929, using the BBC transmitter in London, and by 1930 a regular schedule of programmes was transmitted from the BBC antenna in Brookmans Park. Television production was switched from Baird's company to what is now known as BBC One on August 2, 1932, and continued until September 1935. Regularly scheduled electronically scanned television began from Alexandra Palace in London on November 2, 1936, to just a few hundred viewers in the immediate area. The first programme broadcast and thus the first ever, on a dedicated TV channel was opening of the BBC television service at 15 o'clock. The first major outside broadcast was the coronation of King George, Virgin Islands, US, and Queen Elizabeth in May 1937. The service was reaching an estimated 25,000 euro 40,000 homes before the outbreak of World War II, which caused the service to be suspended in September 1939. The VHF broadcasts would have provided an ideal radio beacon for German bombers homing in on London, and the engineers and technicians of the service would be needed for the war effort, in particular the radar program. Wartime closure. On September 1, 1939, 2 days before Britain declared war on Germany, the station was taken off air with little warning. The government was concerned that the VHF transmissions would act as a beacon to enemy aircraft homing in on London. Also, many of the television service's technical staff and engineers would be needed for the war effort, in particular on the radar program. The last program transmitted was a Mickey Mouse cartoon, Mickey's Gala Premiere, which was followed by test transmissions. This account refuted the popular memory according to which broadcasting was suspended before the end of the cartoon. According to figures from Britain's Radio Manufacturers Association, 18,999 television sets had been manufactured from 1936 to September 1939, when production was halted by the war. The remaining monopoly years. BBC Television returned on June 7, 1946 at 15 o'clock. Jasmine Bligh, one of the original announcers, made the first announcement, saying, "Good afternoon everybody. How are you? Do you remember me, Jasmine Bligh?" The Mickey Mouse cartoon of 1939 was repeated 20 minutes later. Alexandra Palace was the home base of the channel until the early 1950s, when the majority of production moved into the newly acquired Lime Grove studios. Post-war broadcast coverage was extended to Birmingham in 1949 with the opening of the Sutton Coldfield transmitting station, and by the mid-1950s most of the country was covered, transmitting a 405-line interlaced image on VHF. Television transmissions resumed from Alexandra Palace in 1946. The BBC television service showed popular programming, including drama, comedies, documentaries, game shows, and soap operas, covering a wide range of genres, and regularly competed with ITV to become the channel with the highest ratings for that week. The channel also introduced the science fiction show Doctor Who on November 23, 1963, at 17:16, which went on to become one of Britain's most iconic and beloved television programmes. 1964 to 1967 BBC TV was renamed BBC One in 1964, after the launch of BBC Two, the third television station for the UK. Its remit, to provide more niche programming. The channel was due to launch on April 20, 1964, but was put off the air by a massive power failure that affected much of London, caused by a fire at Battersea Power Station. A videotape made on the opening night was rediscovered in 2003 by a BBC technician. In the end, the launch went ahead the following night, hosted by Dennis Tuohy holding a candle. BBC Two was the first British channel to use UHF and 625-line pictures, giving higher definition than the existing VHF 405-line system. 1967 to 2003 . On July 1, 1967, BBC Two became the first television channel in Europe to broadcast regularly in colour, using the West German PAL system that is still in use today, although being gradually superseded by digital systems. Unlike other terrestrial channels, BBC Two does not have soap opera or standard news programming, but a range of programmes intended to be eclectic and diverse. The different remit of BBC Two allowed its first controller, Sir David Attenborough, to commission the first heavyweight documentaries and documentary series such as Civilization, The Ascent of Man and Horizon. In 1967, Tom and Jerry cartoons first aired on BBC One, with around 2 episodes shown every evening at 17 o'clock, with occasional morning showings on CBBC. The BBC stopped airing the famous cartoon duo in 2000. David Attenborough was later granted sabbatical leave from his job as controller to work with the BBC Natural History Unit, which had existed since the 1950s. This unit is now famed throughout the world for producing high-quality programs with Attenborough such as Life on Earth, The Private Life of Plants, The Blue Planet, The Life of Mammals, Planet Earth and Frozen Planet. National and regional variations also occur within the BBC One and BBC Two schedules. England's BBC One output is split up into 15 regions, which exist mainly to produce local news programming, but also occasionally opt out of the network to show programmes of local importance. The other nations of the United Kingdom have been granted more autonomy from the English network. For example, programmes are mostly introduced by local announcers, rather than by those in London. BBC One and BBC Two's schedules in the other UK nations can vary immensely from BBC One and BBC Two in England. Programmes, such as the politically fueled Give My Head piece and the soap opera River City, have been created specifically to cater for some viewers in their respective nations, who may have found programmes created for English audiences irrelevant. BBC Scotland produces daily programmes for its Gaelic-speaking viewers, including current affairs, political and children's programming such as the popular A Squared RPA and Ynys. BBC Wales also produces a large amount of Welsh-language programming for S4C, particularly news, sport and other programmes, especially the soap opera Pobl YCWM. The UK nations also produce a number of programmes that are shown across the UK, such as BBC Scotland's comedy series Chewin' the Fat, and BBC Northern Ireland's talk show Patrick Kielty Almost Live. The BBC is also renowned for its production of costume dramas, such as Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and contemporary social dramas such as Boys from the Black Stuff and Our Friends in the North. The BBC has come under pressure to commission more programmes from independent British production companies, and indeed is legally required to source 25% of its output from such companies by the terms of the Broadcasting Act 1990. Programmes have also been imported mainly from English-speaking countries, notably Euro though no longer shown. Euro examples include The Simpsons from the United States and Neighbours from Australia. Because of the availability of programmes in English, few programmes need use subtitles or dubbing, unlike much European television. The BBC also introduced Ceefax, the first teletext service, starting in 1974. This service allows BBC viewers to view textual information such as the latest news on their television. Ceefax has not made a full transition to digital television, instead being replaced by the new interactive BBC iService. In March 2003 the BBC announced that from the end of May 2003 it intended to transmit all 8 of its domestic television channels unencrypted from the Astra 2D satellite. This move was estimated to save the BBC £85 million over the next 5 years. While the footprint of the Astra 2D satellite was smaller than that of Astra 2A, from which it was previously broadcast encrypted, it meant that viewers with appropriate equipment were able to receive BBC Channel 3 to air over much of Western Europe. Consequently, some rights concerns have needed to be resolved with programme providers such as Hollywood studios and sporting organisations, which have expressed concern about the unencrypted signal leaking out. This led to some broadcasts being made unavailable on the Sky Digital platform, such as Scottish Premier League and Scottish Cup football, while on other platforms such broadcasts were not disrupted. Later, when rights contracts were renewed, this problem was resolved. 2004 onwards. On July 5, 2004, the BBC celebrated the 50th anniversary of its television news bulletins. This event was marked by the release of a DVD, which showed highlights of the BBC's television coverage of significant events over the half-century, as well as changes in the format of the BBC television news. From the newsreel format of the first BBC television news bulletins, to the 24-hour, worldwide news coverage available in 2004. A special edition of Radio Times was also produced, as well as a special section of the BBC News Online website. In 2005 the pioneering BBC television series Little Angels won a BAFTA award. Little Angels was the first reality parenting show, and its most famous episode saw Welsh actress Janine James try to cope with the tantrums of her 6-year-old son. The BBC television department headed by Yana Bennett was absorbed into a new, much larger group. BBC Vision, in late 2006. the new group was part of larger restructuring within the BBC with the onset of new media outlets and technology. In 2008, the BBC began experimenting with live streaming of certain channels in the UK, and in November 2008, all standard BBC television channels were made available to watch online. In October 2013, the BBC announced its World War I centenary season, which includes 130 newly commissioned programmes. Funding: the BBC domestic television channels do not broadcast advertisements. They are instead funded by a television licence fee which TV viewers are required to pay annually. This includes viewers who watch real-time streams of the BBC's channels online or via their mobile phone. The BBC's international television channels are funded by advertisements and subscription. Division: as a division within the BBC, television was formerly known as BBC Vision for a few years in the early 21st century, until its name reverted to television in 2013. It is responsible for the commissioning, producing, scheduling and broadcasting of all programming on the BBC's television channels, and is led by Danny Cohen. Channels equals free to air in the UK equals. These channels are also available outside the UK in neighbouring countries, for example Belgium and the Netherlands. BBC One, the corporation's primary network, broadcasting mainstream comedy, drama, documentaries, films, news, sport, and some children's programmes. BBC One is also the home of the BBC's main 30-minute news bulletins, currently shown at 13 o'clock, 18:00, and 22:00, and overnight bulletins from BBC World News every Monday to Sunday. The main news bulletins are followed by local news. These are provided by production centres in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and a further 14 regional and sub-regional centres in England. The centres also produce local news magazine programming. Most watched programme, EastEnders. Shutdown of all UK analogue television stations began in 2008 and finished in October 2012, leaving only digital transmission for terrestrial services. A high-definition simulcast, BBC One HD, launched on November 3, 2010. A one-hour time shift, BBC 1+1, was announced in October 2013. BBC Two, home to more specialist programming, including comedy, documentaries, dramas, children's programming and minority interest programs, as well as imported programs from other countries, particularly the United States. An important feature of the schedule is News Night, a 50-minute news analysis program shown each weeknight at 22:30. There are slight differences in the programming for England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The most notable is a separate final 20 minutes for News Night broadcast in Scotland. Most watched programme, Top Gear. A high-definition simulcast, BBC Two HD, launched on March 26, 2013. BBC Three, home to mainly youth-oriented programming, particularly new comedy sketch shows and sitcoms. A high-definition simulcast, BBC Three HD, launched on December 10, 2013. BBC Four, niche programming for an intellectual audience, including specialist documentaries, occasional serious dramas, live theatre, foreign language films and television programmes and prestige archive television repeats. A high-definition simulcast, BBC Four HD, launched on December 10, 2013. BBC News, a dedicated news channel. Time shares with BBC World News 0000 0600 and 2100-2200 daily, a high-definition simulcast, BBC News HD, launched on December 10, 2013. BBC Parliament, the corporation's dedicated politics channel, covering both the UK Parliament, Scottish Parliament, Welsh Assembly, Northern Ireland Assembly, and international politics. CBBC, for children aged 7 and above. A high-definition simulcast, CBBC HD, launched on December 10, 2013. CBeebies, for children under 7. A high-definition simulcast, CBeebies HD, launched on December 10, 2013. Other public service S4C, Although this Welsh-language channel is not operated by the corporation, the BBC contributes programmes funded by the licence fee as part of its public service obligation. The BBC used to broadcast Welsh-language programmes on its own channels in Wales, but these were transferred to S4C when it started broadcasting in 1982. BBC Alba, a part-time Scottish Gaelic channel. Although it carries the BBC name, it is a partnership between the BBC and MG Alba, with the majority of funding coming from the Scottish Government via MG Alba. Scottish Gaelic programmes are also shown on BBC Two in Scotland. Subject to approval from the BBC Trust, they will move to BBC Alba after digital switchover. International news BBC World News, an international, commercially funded 24-hour news channel, not officially available to UK viewers but is shown on BBC News BBC One BBC Two between 0000-0530 and 3 editions 1130-1200 on BBC 2/1900 Euro 1930 on BBC 4 on 2100-2200 on BBC News Channel. BBC Worldwide The BBC's wholly owned commercial subsidiary, BBC Worldwide, also operates several international television channels under BBC branding. BBC America, a U.S. general entertainment channel, distributed in cooperation with AMC Networks, showcasing British television programming. BBC Arabic TV, a news and factual programming channel broadcast to the Middle East and North Africa. It was launched on March 11, 2008. BBC Canada, a Canadian general entertainment channel, co-owned with Shaw Media. BBC HD, a high-definition channel, currently available in Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Puerto Rico, Uruguay, Venezuela, Poland. BBC HD Nordics, a high-definition channel, currently available in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland and Iceland, and Turkey. BBC Kids, a Canadian children's programming channel co-owned with Shaw Media. BBC Entertainment, broadcasts comedy, drama, light entertainment and children's programming by BBC and other UK production houses, available in the following regions: Asia, Europe, Middle East, India, Latin America, Nordic, Poland, and South Africa. BBC Lifestyle, lifestyle programming, currently available in Poland, Scandinavia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and South Africa. BBC Knowledge, documentaries and factual programming, currently available in Australia, Bulgaria, Hong Kong, Indonesia, New Zealand, Poland, Scandinavia, Singapore, and South Africa. BBC UK TV, an entertainment channel in Australia and New Zealand, carrying drama and comedy programmes from the BBC, Talkback Thames, ITV, and Channel 4. BBC Brit, an entertainment subscription television channel featuring male-skewed factual entertainment programming. Launched 1 February 2015 in Poland, April 2015 for Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland and Iceland, replacing BBC Entertainment, BBC Earth, and documentary subscription television channel featuring premium factual programming. Launched 1 February 2015 in Poland, April 2015 for Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland and Iceland, and as of 14 April 2015 in Hungary, replacing BBC Knowledge. Also set to replace BBC Knowledge in Asia as of 3 October 2015 21 hours 00 Singapore Hong Kong time. BBC First, an upcoming entertainment subscription television channel featuring drama and comedy programming. Launched 1 February 2015 in Australia. It also launched in the Netherlands on May 16, 2015, and on cable service Telenet in the Flemish region of Belgium began to receive the channel from 4 June 2015. The BBC also co-owns the following channels and joint ventures with other broadcasters: UK TV, commercial television network in the United Kingdom, co-owned with Scripps Networks Interactive. The channels broadcast mainly BBC archive and specially produced programming. BBC Persian, news channel that targets Persian-speaking countries including Iran, Afghanistan and Tajikistan in the Persian Tajiki language. BBC Japan was a general entertainment channel, which operated between December 2004 and April 2006. It ceased operations after its Japanese distributor folded. BBC Hindi. A new BBC Hindi TV news program is launching on ETV network and on the BBC Hindi website chindi.com. See also, list of television programs broadcast by the BBC, history of BBC television idents, BBC television drama, BBC local radio, BBC World Service, British Broadcasting Company, Limited, for a history of the BBC prior to 1927. Timeline of the BBC for an overview of BBC history. Early television stations, Freesat. References. External links, BBC TV at BBC Online.